Hi, this is author-philosopher Ronald E. Springer of EthicsUnderground.com, here to continue the reading of Moral Armor, Chapter 8, Part 2, The Tragedy of Submission. Please hit like and subscribe before we dive in. A wealth of men cherish their time on Earth so much that they want to experience the best of everything, while at the same time, hordes of undifferentiated are pleased to settle for no more than any possible handout can secure. Underneath the weight of such lethargy is the frantic clawing they are prone to in response to their own sense of dysfunction. Held from the view of fear-driven man is existence itself. Early on, some men suffer a panic attack against the very responsibility of vision and coherence. Perhaps upon opening his eyes and realizing an effort on his part is required to focus and to distinguish sounds, certain of his own inadequacy, he freezes. Utterly helpless in this warped, blurry world, the vibration he feels as the very undercurrent of existence is a life-threatening intimidation. Unable to back out of the basic obligations imposed by life, with fear growing at an almost audible pace, it's too much. His terror of self-chosen action becomes so total that he claws towards any means of its avoidance. He runs cognitively, ingraining a behavioral pattern of constant disengagement, and ends up only able and willing to see the world through the eyes and minds of others. In so choosing, he has wiped out his own identity, his first victim. A dependency is an outside condition without which an entity cannot live, and a man's first dependency is upon those who sustain him. Beginning as a natural condition to be shed upon self-establishment, fear-driven man bucks nature and intends no separation. As he feels no individual graces, no positive use for sovereignty, it becomes implicit to his consciousness that we are all inexplicably tied to each other. He relinquishes control of his judgment and even his senses, to be superseded and overridden by any claim of other men. Wrapped up in how he sees others, and how he is seen by others, the nature of existence is a bypassed or forgotten consideration. Submission wins him nothing, because in renouncing control of his consciousness, there is no other power capable of assuming proper responsibility. His mind and life just stagnate. Fear shuts him down, breaching his connections between integration and sense. But as denial is the base premise of pretense, his white flag is never seen. He can identify rational standards, but evades them as soon as they are uttered, sensing danger. Ability, conviction, and reality are not real to him. Only the sentiment of others is. Sentiment is his lifeblood and must be monitored carefully. To be pleasing to others is a life or death subject to him, and he negates his own choice to the point where, if put into words, you would hear him say, "Tell me, does this feel good or bad to me? Do I like this, or are we against it?" As one's identity is a result of personal choice and taste, his is replaced with whatever whoever is around him vents as a preference until a more dominant entity comes into range. When alone, he faces an abyss, a void of identity, so he cannot be alone. Consonant with his own practice, he considers all human traits to be pretenses, designed to impress or frighten others. He must exist within others, as with nature denied and consciousness negated, no other form of identity exists. Sentiment begins as his view of himself held by others, and becomes his view of existence held by others. With life seen only second-hand, men become the first axiom of his existence, and all of his primary standards become social. For other fear-driven, it was cemented years later, forced into submission by those holding a greater physical power. They were bullied, most often when looking up to adults for guidance and truth, and instead found themselves subjected to violence for a host of reasons: the awareness of what they weren't supposed to acknowledge, innocent questioning in the presence of denial, an early attempt to reason, all squashed by crude adults threatened by the honesty of a child. On one side, he sees a malevolent universe which holds some dark, unknown peril at every sensation. On the other, he sees a menacing force much greater than his own, with no rationale to guide it. Reason clearly is not on the winning side. Stuck between the incapacity to face existence and men who disallow the process anyway, unable to deal with either, he gives in and uses his tools only enough to evade what he perceives as a danger. As his first enemy is existence, his second becomes consciousness. Consciousness being the inescapable link to his first enemy, and his only means to direct his illusion, he uses it to pull a barrier between himself and existence. The barrier can only be his third enemy, other men. He chooses to side with the least of these evils, the penalty he knows, subhuman brutality. He must face existence or man to pursue his sustenance, and while existence is an unknown road, the road of deceitful appeasement is provided by those demanding his submission. Instead of considering violent actions to be evil, he comes to consider them necessary. As he is motivated by fear, and others attempt to motivate him by fear, his conclusion is inherently confirmed. The tactics coincide, yet his own capacity is humbled in this regard. Instead of looking to how things should and could be, he accepts that submission to a dominant force is the proper human condition, that peace and honesty are only shields of mercy held up by the weak, doomed by design. The submission/domination axis has, in his mind, become inescapable and therefore axiomatic. The fundamental axioms of existence and consciousness have been replaced by the substitutes of men and their coercive relation to one another. Instead of independence, he looks forward to the day when he will be the dominant force and will no longer need to be afraid. Of course, he doesn't realize that his highest aspiration has been chosen by fear itself, whose tenets will henceforth rule his destiny. That's all for now. Next up is A Fool's Paradise, the birth of altruism. I split these videos up by subject so you'd have a better chance of finding moral armor, and then perhaps go through the whole thing for free. Why? To help create a leader in every life. Sound civilization stair-steps up from sound coherence to sound individual to productive groups of mature individuals. Self-hatred drives fear-driven people in our world to wipe out the individual, so we all need moral armor to protect ourselves and the future of mankind. Click subscribe and leave a thumbs up if you'd like to help wipe out moral confusion fast and make the world a better place.